We're seeing the numbers go down slightly. Are we actually safe? Are we reaching a point where we can say we've passed this fourth wave?
I don't think we're past it in every province, but we certainly passed it in Gauteng and in several of the provinces. We're at the tail end of the fourth wave. There are a couple of lessons we're going to take from it. I think anyone who's still not vaccinated needs to just be a little bit fearful to get vaccinated as quickly as possible. I just came off a call with a whole of Australians and South Americans and Europeans and North Americans, and their ICUs are full of people pretty much who are unvaccinated. So, there's still a virus circulating. So those are the people who need to watch out for getting severely ill.
Many people argue now that they don't want the vaccine or don't need it because they have immunity, so to speak. What do you say to them based on the research that you've actually conducted with regards to this here in South Africa and abroad? As you say, you were on a call.
So certainly, if you have had the virus before, you do have a lot of immunity. And they're right. It's a form of vaccination. It's a terrible form of vaccination because you run all the risks of COVID and all the long-term consequences of COVID. But you certainly do have immunity. The best way to get immunity is with the vaccination, which is a much safer way to do it. We are steadily learning that, it's probably not enough, especially not with Omicron, which seems to have got past the initial defenses with surprising ease. So, we're going to wait and see in terms of people who've been vaccinated. It is an argument actually to say I've had COVID previously. I don't need the vaccine. My personal view is that you're rolling a very, very small dice there, and that the risk associated with getting a vaccination versus the benefits you're probably going to have is silly. We're looking at a situation where people probably are going to need 2 to 3 vaccines, and possibly more than that over their lifetimes. And just getting a dose of the virus is probably going to be the equivalent of one of those. But we're sort of learning that as we're going along.
So there's lots of talk abroad in South Africa as well about us reaching or entering the endemic phase of this disease. Talk to us about what that's going to look like, because we have a warning from the WHO saying that we can't let our guard down even if we are approaching this.
So, we also, as a corollary to that, we also can't live on code red for the rest of time. And this term endemic is a little bit misplaced. These massive surges we had with both the Delta virus and the Omicron, is nothing endemic about it. Those are epidemic levels of viral infection. We estimate perhaps as many as half of all South Africans contracted the Omicron variant during the sort of December-January period. So that's nothing endemic about it. That's an epidemic surge. We are going to enter a situation where the circulating coronaviruses are probably going to look like the other coronaviruses, where we are going to need to live with the virus. But it's very important to understand is living with the virus does not mean ignoring the virus and meaning that we do nothing about it. So we are going to need to open our society up in a responsible and careful way and a thoughtful way. But we cannot live, in a perpetual situation where curfews, outdoor masking, a whole range of interventions which actually don't make sense are the order of the day in South Africa. So there are a lot of these mitigation measures, some of which never had any justification, some of which are long past their sell-by date, that we're going to need to revisit in post-Omicron fourth wave.
What have we learned from the fourth wave in terms of a fifth wave and how it'll affect the country and people going forward? I know it's hard to predict because the virus mutates constantly, but what can we say right now when it comes to the fifth wave?
I think the one thing we're pretty confident about is that our previous waves tragically have the people who've survived infection have been granted a lot of immunity, and the third of South Africans who are fully vaccinated have also been granted a lot of immunity. And there's obviously overlap between the people who've been vaccinated and infected. What Omicron did 2 things, which was very surprising. Firstly was the speed of infection and how infectious it was, and it's probably the same for you and for me, is just how it took apart families and friends and colleagues in a way that the previous surges didn't. The sheer force and speed of infection was something that we haven't seen with the previous variants. And we're seeing that across the globe at the moment. So I was just talking to the Australians and the Brazilians, and they were just saying that how shocked they are at how quickly it's spread within their own countries. And this surge of infection is fast. The second thing is that the previous variants have, to some extent, not been able to always penetrate the protection of the vaccines in terms of infection. So the sore throat, just getting infected. They've been very good at protecting you from hospital. Now Omicron has managed to get past the initial defenses quite easily in terms of all the vaccines. But luckily our vaccines and our previous immunity from infection has managed to largely protect us from the severe consequences, which is why our hospitals have not overflowed. There's been an increase in hospitalizations, but it's actually been relatively muted compared certainly to June, which was a relative catastrophe for the country.
All right, thank you so much for the insight. Appreciate it. Infectious diseases specialist, Professor Francois Venter.